Okay, so, well, this talk, it's called Artists Going to the Light, and it's about the fundamentals of light in video games. Maybe I should introduce myself. I'm Daniel. I was 10 years working in advertising companies as art director and graphic designer. And then I decided to make the jump to video game industry because video games were my passion. So I moved on video games. I've been working on mobile and console and PC games. And yeah, those last years, I've been working in a lot of different companies and for different companies. But the last years, I am part of THQ Nordic. It's a big publisher, a big editor of games, super big company. And we created THQ Nordic Barcelona that later became THQ Nordic Alkimia Interactive. Alkimia Interactive is a studio that THQ Nordic has in Barcelona, and we have been working the last years in some game called Gothic remake that we're still doing there. I'm also a professor at university, and this year I promised myself this year I will finish my doctoral thesis about art and video games. But yeah, this is basically me. Two small things before starting. I mean, take in mind this is at 20 minutes. Let me put this here. Yes.
Actually, you have a full hour, so don't rush yourself.
Okay, perfect. So we can go slowly. Perfect.
Yes.
There's no magic recipe on how to create a super cool, amazing illumination for your game. Okay, I mean, and this talk is not about neither a compilation of tricks in Unreal or Unity, and maybe you are asking why. And because every game is a complete different adventure. I mean, the light in all of the games, in every specific game, it's completely different. A different adventure in terms of light and color, and they're the magic recipes for the light, okay? And also you have to take in mind that the software and technology changes every few years. And finally, because we need to always go back to the fundamentals of light. We need to understand the fundamentals and how the light can help us to improve and reinforce emotions and memorability on our games, okay? So then what is this talk about? Well, this talk will take us back in time to meet some painters who defied the rules on how the use of lights during their age, and we will try to remember some of the lessons we learned from them. This talk will be a fast overview on some lighting principles that hopefully maybe will foster your creativity and curiosity to keep learning and improving your lighting skills. I always tell to my students and some of the members of my team that the light is everything in the end. Setting the right mood and the right atmosphere, it's key for having a good, an overall emotive and good-looking video game. And finally, I will share some thoughts and super fast advices on how to approach the lighting based on my personal experience and how we work at Alkimia doing what we do. So before starting, and I would like to think, and that's a romantic definition, I know that an artist must create memorable moments and must create memories and transmit emotions with his work. But also what an artist does in video games. I mean, we try to help to create a vision, to define visually and aesthetically an idea. We also are in charge to push the boundaries of this idea and try to create something memorable in the eyes of the player. And finally, but super important, we use the art as a tool to emphasize the emotional impact on our creations, right? And this is something similar to what artists were saying 100 years ago. For example, Alphonse Mucha, the symbolist painter, was saying the expression of beauty is by emotion. The person who can communicate these emotions to the soul of the other is the artist. Okay, so I know this is a romantic definition, and maybe video games are in a different side of the field. Maybe you understand video games as a product, but for me also the video games are a meaning to say impactful and emotional things. So, which tools do we have as an artist or art directors to accomplish that challenge? I mean, it's so easy to say, but so difficult to do. We can study the psychology of color and deciding where and how to use it. For example, Eva Heller has some interesting books about psychology of color. We can study and use the theory of the visual perception, the theory of composition in art. We can try to create a unique art style. This is super complicated. Or we can try to appeal to we can try to use a very appealing artistic style, no? An artistic style that you always can associate with other things. And in the end, we can use the light in a meaningful way. There's more things to do over there, by the way. So using the light in a meaningful way, it's so easy to say and so difficult to apply. And we can go back to the Baroque. And in Spain, we say Barroco. And it was one of the most interesting painting periods on human history. And we can meet masters like Velázquez or Caravaggio or Rembrandt. This was the first time they understood the light was a powerful ally in creating emotions in the viewer, and not only an excuse to see the characters and the environments in the painting, right? Suddenly, for those people, for those guys, the light had a dramatic purpose. And here is where our trouble starts. I would like to show you this image. It's one of my favorite images. Actually, it was 2 weeks ago, I was seeing this picture in person in Madrid. It's in the Museo del Prado. It's an amazing painter. I think it's one of the best painters in Spanish history. It's from Velázquez. It probably, for me, is the best painter in history. But let's take a look at this image. It's called Apollo in the Forge of Vulcan, Apolo en la Forja de Vulcano in Spanish. The cool thing here is how the painter is deciding the light of the scene completely on purpose. Look at the Apollo's crowd of mystical light, right? It's a light that is not affecting the rest of the characters. Velázquez decides that he wants to use this light as a focal point, but this light is not having impact on the rest of characters. Instead, he's choosing to use a light angled from left to illuminate the figures and separate them into different layers of perception. Another interesting thing about this painting, another interesting decision he took, was not painting the emissive light coming from the incandescent piece of metal that is being forged in the center of the scene. You would expect some reddish and orange reflections over the skin of the characters, but essentially it's not there. It's not there because Velázquez decided that having this focal point probably could make the viewer to change his perception of the focal point of the picture, right? So Velázquez decided to use the light in a dramatic purpose. But if we are talking about dramatic purpose, we should, and about designing light, we should talk about Caravaggio. Caravaggio is a precursor of Velázquez. It was like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, a little before. This painting is called The Calling of St. Matthew. And the Italian painter, he was the master of chiaroscuro. The claroscuro is in Spanish. It's cool because in the Italians, they call them the masters of light. And the same painters in Spain, the painters that were doing the same, playing with shadows and light, they were calling, in Spain, they were called the masters of dark, the tenebristas. But it's nice that this Italian painter was a master of chiaroscuro, and he used the light and the shadows in a very dramatic and spectacular way. Super high contrast, almost no mid-tones, only this mystical ray of light coming from the right upper corner, and that crosses the scene and illuminates the darkness. It is Jesus telling Matthew that his turn to be named apostle has come and he should follow the light. Caravaggio and his followers, they understood the light, and this is something that can be also applied to almost all Barroco painters. They understood the light almost as a binary thing, from 1 to 0, light versus darkness, okay? And now we need to make a jump. 200 years in the future, suddenly we find the Romantic painters. This amazing scene is from one of my favorite painters, also is Caspar David Friedrich. He was a Romantic painter, and the Romantic painters, on the contrary, were all about softness and subtle shades of color coming from the sky. Let's take a look at this Friedrich painting. For example, the light is diffuse and helps to create this cold, but at the same time peaceful mood, right? And they played a lot with the contrast and the scale of shapes, but they understood how the light coming from the sky, the light reflected in the sky, could improve the mood of their sublime paintings. And now the shadows, if you see the ground of this painting, now the shadows were not black anymore. Now the shadows are blue, because they understood that the sky is illuminating the shadows in real life. Okay, so we went from directional light, from understanding 0 and 1 the shadows, like a binary thing, to the romantic painters, where the sky, it's actually illuminating the shadows. And then we do another jump in time. The next step of evolution were the Impressionist painters. Take a look at this Monet picture, right? They were obsessed with understanding exactly how the light worked and the way it affected the different surfaces. And take a look at the green shades coming from the ground that are enlightening the bluish and whitish dress of the women in the picture, right? Those shades are nothing else than the light reflecting the color of the green plants of the ground. So they started to think about concepts like reflecting light, subsurface scattering, transmitted light. In other words, they were the grandfathers of something that we today in giants in Unreal Engine or Unity Engine, we call global illumination. They understood that the 3 main factors for lighting a picture, for lighting a rendering, are coming from the direct sun, from the sun of the sky, and from the reflected light. And we needed like almost, 300, 400, 500 years to understand those 3 basic concepts of light. And what happened when we all understood how the light was working? Well, the next step, of course, is destroying everything. I mean, now that we know how the light works, then we arrive to symbolism, for example, where Mucha decide completely to work with light. I mean, he's not he doesn't care about the use of a realistic light. He is only using the light for emphasizing the emotional impact of the image. No? So we have been seeing the evolution of our understanding on how light works, but the symbolist painters took the lessons and took the approach to the next level. They used light and color to create images that evoked strange states of mind. Mucha, for example, creates a gloomy atmosphere in this picture you can see, with controlling the light, controlling the color, and he's trying to evoke a dream. Okay, it's not about using realistic use of light sources. It's not important where the light comes from or if the composition has multiple lights. The painter now understands exactly how the light works and is designing the light set up for creating emotions in the viewer. And that's all. This is all that he cares about. And the story goes on, and for sure we can find lessons learned by studying the classics in modern films, TV shows, pictures, magazine covers, and of course, interactive productions like video games. You can see those 3 examples are master classes of use of light, from The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari to What Remains of Edith Finch, that is an incredible video game, or even The Corpse Bride from Tim Burton, that uses the light in a very, very meaningful way. So you could say, okay, I got this. I know where we come from. That's an interesting thing about art history, but how the light can help me doing a game? How can I decide how important should be the light in a game? Okay, I'm sure there are more aspects, but I would like to stick to those 3 general aspects. I think they are the most important. A good light design can improve the perception, the mood, and the this is a complicated word for a Spanish guy. Believability. I don't know how to say that in English in the right way, but I think you can understand what I'm trying to say. Okay, first of all, perception. A good light can help us to identify shapes, illuminating them complete or partially, right? Also can help to hide details in intermediate light zones or even in the darkness. And finally, can help us to separate shapes from the background and create layers of information. So look, for example, at this alien in the picture, right? The important thing about him is his shape and how he's separated from the background. The light coming from the right upper corner is working as a field light to uncover some of the skin details. But if you think about it, almost all the details are hidden. I mean, this is a frame from the first Alien movie. This essentially was a guy inside a suit, a leather suit, okay? Probably the suit doesn't have all the details needed to make this a believable creature. So we are going to use the light to hide always the most small details. We're using the light to, to cut out only the silhouette, only the shape, to make this memorable. They wanted us to recognize the xenomorph. By the way, if you are a nerd like me, you know that this is not an alien. This is called properly a xenomorph. And I mean, not the small veins, the muscle details in the monster, we didn't care about that. We only need to recognize the shape of the xenomorph. And this is one of the key differences when you see the modern movies, the modern alien movies, right? Now we have aliens done by CGI, plenty of details, but it was much more believable, the original Alien, right? From the Ridley Scott movie. And I think this is something that is happening also in the dinosaurs of Jurassic World. Any one of you saw the latest Jurassic World movies? The raptors, the T-Rex, everything is so super high detail. Everything is, they are super close shots to the camera with all the super detail. Instead, Jurassic Park, the original one, everything was almost hidden in the dark, right? Almost had no details. And this makes them super believable, and now we have seen raptors in 3D going flowing through the camera and the camera panning around the raptor, and somehow it affects the perception of the light, okay? So this is a moment, in summary, we could say that the light helps us to perceive and distribute layers of information, right? So maybe this is the moment where you can ask yourself, what do I want exactly to show in my game, in my picture, in my render? And even more important, what do I want exactly to hide? Something it's more important, the question about what I want to hide instead of what I want to show. So it's more important the global shape, or are more important the details? Okay. Second concept, the mood. I hope you recognize this still. It's from one of the best James Bond's movies. It's called Skyfall. The light can, and it shows how the light can also help with the mood. Tension, love, melancholy, sadness, emotion, fear. We can define a mood for our scene with the right designs of light. And this mood can have a strong emotional impact in the viewer and can be more important than the light coherence or the realism. I will show you later a video of Lord of the Rings, and you will freak out how they play with the lights, right? But for example, take a look at this Skyfall picture, no? It's filled with sadness and melancholy, no? The diffuse light coming from the sky, it almost helps to make disappear the shadows. We have no shadows. The composition, it's man versus nature. It's a man confronting the inevitable destiny, the inevitable future. This is not so far from what the Romantic painters were doing 200 years ago. It's almost the same approach. It's pure romanticism in an image, right? I mean, everything is illuminated by the light reflected on the clouds. So basically, we are getting the most saturated version of the colors without volume. We are not seeing volume here. We are only seeing plain colors, shapes in colors, and no shadows. Okay, this is creating a specific mood. So, and this brings us an idea about what we should talk about. It's the idea of continuity. And there are different schools of opinion about this topic, about continuity from shot to shot. I tend to think that doesn't matter, the continuity. Doesn't matter where the light is placed or if it changes from shot to shot, as long as it doesn't break the mood. And I think this should be an artistic decision. But as I was telling you before, let's take a look at one of the classical and most used examples of light continuity in movies. I will put you a short video of The Lord of the Rings. And please, I would put the video, it's like 20 seconds video. Have in mind, take a look at how the light, okay, the light of the moon is behaving. Sometimes you will see the light of the moon behind Frodo, but in the next shot, you will see the light of the moon in front of Frodo. And sometimes you will see the light of the moon at the side of Frodo. Okay, take a look at the position of the light. Okay, let's go. You can see the light from behind Frodo, and in the next shot, now the light it's on the other side, opposite. Now the light's in the side. Now the light is again in the back. I mean, it's Frodo running to his friends, and the light is changing completely. I mean, he is placing the light on what he needs to be placed, right? I mean, we can start here, for example. we can see it was called Sam, right? Sam is getting the light in front of the Sam. Frodo is getting the light in the back of Frodo, right? Because the next shot, the light. Remember that Frodo is running to Sam and his friends, but in the next shot, oh, the light is again, but now it's back on Frodo friends. The next shot, the lights, it's on the side of Frodo. It's on the back of his friends. It's on the back of Frodo, the back of his friends. It's on the side of Frodo. Okay, it's in the back, in the back. Now the light, it's again in the back. And now again, it's in the back. I mean, the light is changing from shot to shot, and who cares? Who cares? Because the mood, it's there. The mood is the same. Okay, so let's talk about one of my favorite games. It's called What Remains of Edith Finch. I'm gonna put the video and I will be telling you what is happening, right? The game starts with Edith, the main character, walking to her family house, crossing this gray and melancholic forest. Look how the gray color impregnates everything. Even the sky is gray. Edith is remembering the sadness and the bittersweet feelings that she has for this place. Wait a moment. Okay, remember, everything is gray. She's remembering the sadness and she's remembering the bittersweet feelings she had for this place. And then suddenly everything is gray, right? And suddenly he finds an entrance to the garage of the house, right? And now everything, look at the colors. Wow. Now it's everything reddish, gold shades. Even look, the light is flowing through the window. The reddish colors, the afternoon sun filtering, everything screams you're at home, you're safe now. Of course, it's an artistic decision. And the continuity of the light is not important as long as we are creating the right mood. But you can see here, Edith is going from gray to sun, right? Look at how the sun is flowing through the window, right? And these reddish and orange tones, shades of color. I mean, it's okay. As long as the mood is the right one, we can change the position of the light. And finally, the third concept, it's believability. The key concept is the illumination of a scene doesn't need to be real. Instead, it should be believable. And it's sometimes being believable could mean not to be completely accurate from a real light source point of view. It's an artistic decision, but a good light design should work hand with the story and should always try to create an emotional impact. For example, let's see this image. Are you seeing something weird here? Take a look at this image. Everything seems real, right? The light design is telling us about a possible window on the right side of the image, right? We can see shadows of trees. You can see them over in the American flag, over the American flag and the Ronald Reagan picture. You can see some shades from trees, some shadows. We can imagine a garden, or at least a typical USA school being located in a nice place, the afternoon sun casting light and shadows, creating a warm and comfy mood. And this feels real. Is the light going through the windows and the global illumination doing its magic? But this is far from being real. Actually, the light is not coming through the windows, it's coming from diffusers. And can you see the shadows of the tree? Can you see this hanging branch of tree from the ceiling? This is what is projecting shadows, actually, not the real trees. So it's believable, but it's not real. Okay, this is the thing. This is a complete design set with diffusers of light, a fake light shaft. Even we have a tree branch hanging from the ceiling. Well, as I said, you guys, the light is not real, but it's believable, and that's the key of the thing. So we know where we are and where we are coming from, and also how a good design of light can help our creation. We can remember a good light design can help to improve the perception, the mood, and the believability. It's time to go into the light. So let's imagine you are about to start your light design. You have references, mood boards, the emotion you want to work with. It's pretty clear. And the first question you start hanging around your head. What about the direction of the light? And this light, it's coming from a natural source or it's coming from an artificial source. And depending on the answers, the properties of the light will change, and our way to approach the world will likely change too. Let's talk about direction of the light. This is a connotative meaning, and it is super interesting. And just only where we place the light, the direction of the main light, we can change completely the feeling of the scene. Take a look at this poor guy with a mustache. This guy, and let's see what kind of extra info or connotative meaning we can get depending on just the position of the light. Depending on the direction of the light, we have a funny and harmless illusionist on the upper right corner. Okay, this guy in the upper right corner. It's a funny and harmless illusionist. We can go to a mysterious Italian mobster closing a deal in a very obscure warehouse on the lower left corner. And we can also go to a 19th century New Orleans voodoo practitioner in the lower right corner. And it's the same guy. It's the same guy, just changing direction of the light and the color of the light, right? So we can imagine other stories about this guy, but it's crazy to think how the perception of the image can change, just changing the direction of the light, right? The second question is natural or artificial? And that's the second question that will arise when you are designing your light setup. And please, it's important to remember that you can mix artificial and natural light sources. So one doesn't exclude the other. So we can have a natural illumination coming from the sun and also use some artificial lights to remark and just spot on some specific places. Let's talk about the natural light. And we need to understand the natural light in photos, in paintings, or in a modern graphic engines like Unity or Unreal. It's the same. And as I told you before, here we have a final render. This could have been done in Unity or Unreal, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, and you already know that when you are working with this kind of software, it's not only about placing a directional light and see magic happen. It's a little more tricky. This is what we can consider a final render, but a final render is divided in 3 different light sources: the sunlight, the skylight, and the rebound light. And the light is coming from the sunlight, okay? The sunlight, the directional light, as we call it in Unity or Unreal, is the light of the sun. The diffuse skylight is coming from the atmosphere. And finally, the rebound or reflected light, it's coming from the light being reflected and rebounded from surfaces. The calculation of the 3 is what is happening each time you make your light maps, or if you are using some real-time cool global illumination engine like in Real 5. So the sunlight is the light coming from the sun. It's called directional light. It's the first step in your light design. Even it offers generally the cheapest shadows in terms of render cost. We should note that those shadows are hard and black. It's like when Caravaggio was playing with lights in the Barocco. This can be hardly for artistic or extreme approach to your illumination, where you need super hard and contrasted shadows. And think about some expressionist German movies, I don't know, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or Nosferatu or Metropolis. They use this kind of approach of light, right? The sun, directional sun, and it's super hard white and super hard black. This is pure Caravaggio. Then we go to the romantic painters. As I told you before, they were trying to learn that the light also comes from the sky. And remember, the shadows are not black. So the diffuse light that comes from the dispersion of photons or the atmosphere, it's called skylight in Unreal or environment lighting in Unity. It's basically the shade of color that comes from the sky, and it kind of tints our render shadows. So it's responsible of illuminating them. It's, as I told you, it's the romantic painters thing, okay? They were masters of using this light. They understood how the light coming from the sky, not only from the sun, could improve the mood of their landscapes. And we can do this in real time in our engines today, in our video games. And finally, we have the rebound light. The reflected light that happens when a ray of light can be rebound or absorbed by a surface depending on its color. It's a super complicated concept to explain, but a white object will rebound all the color wavelengths, and the dark object will absorb them. So this will happen also with artificial light. So for example, take a look at this Abraham Lincoln image. If the white light impacts against a red surface, this red surface will, these rebounded photons will bleed this red color onto the nearest surfaces, right? This is a super fast and not super accurate description, but this is essentially radiance. And the same principle is happening with the green light rebounding from the green grass, illuminating the shadow, the cloth of the women in this painting of Monet. They were, for this reason, I was telling you before that they were the masters of global illumination, right? So all three together, the mix of those three types of light sources is giving us the look of a modern, realistic render. We should understand how they are working and decide if we want to use the three or not, because we can decide. We can make a game or a render, an image or an advertising, just only using one, two, or the three of them. So this is an artistic decisions. And finally, the artificial lights. I would like to divide the artificial lights in 4 divisions and 4 types. I will say those types are found in Unity and Unreal, so in all of your favorite game engines are there. We have the point light, we have the spotlight, we have the rec light or the area light, it's the same. And finally, we have the emissive surfaces. The point light is like a bulb. The shadows are super costly, so be careful. And it's the perfect option to simulate GI, global illumination, if you don't have it, or to use as a field light for a character or an environment. The spotlight is super cheap. It's a handy way to increase the dramatic weight. The shadows are cheaper. It's like 4 times cheaper, the shadows, than the point light. And we can use gobos and project shadows and cookies like the old cinema movies were doing. And finally, we have the area light. It usually doesn't work in real time, so it's for baking if you're using Unity, but thanks God in Unreal, we have it on real time also too. Offers a very soft studio look, like having a big diffuser, something that you will place on the windows, for example. And finally, we have the emissive surfaces. Think about it as the small lights of your gadgets or the TV screen when it's turned on, and your laptop screen. This kind of surfaces, or a LED screen, illumination, LED, you know, the typical type of LED, LED stripe thing. It's an emissive surface, okay? They can shine, and it will illuminate partially, but it's an interesting thing for making, you know, sci-fi or more modern paintings or renders environments. So basically, those were the main light artificial sources. And I always try to follow 2 basic rules that will help me the design of lighting setup when I'm doing some indoor environment. And for me, the 2 guidelines that you should use, in my opinion, they are purpose and multiplicity. If we are designing the light of an indoor environment, we should start thinking about the purpose of the space, how the people are using the space. Is it a functional office? You can make yourself these kind of questions, right? Is it an underground corridor that connects 2 torture chambers? Of course, this is not this picture, but we should find a believable purpose for our lighting design. For example, let's take a look at this living room. We can see different point lights coming from the ceiling and also in the mid-level with the intention of creating a comfy and pleasant mood and atmosphere. The light is yellow to reinforce the feeling of being home-like, to be in a warm environment. Also, we have light projected onto the walls, so the light gets diffused in a natural way, creating those smooth transitions from color to from light to dark, and also to soften the brightness on the shadows. So it's trying to create this comfy and you know, and home-like mood. Something completely different from this kitchen, right? The kitchen is completely different because here it's not about creating a comfy mood. This is not about creating a home-like feeling. Here it's all about creating a super functional diffuse light, because the diffuse light kills the shadows. And the kitchen is a place where you need to see every element in its perfect way without the shadows, because you don't need, how can I say that? Kitchen is a workspace where you have to see perfectly the shape and the texture of the food if you don't want to cut off your finger, right? It's important to control the shadows. And this takes to the idea that finding the purpose of the place we're trying to illuminate is the key, is essential to decide how the light should behave. And for example, because when you're using some artificial lights, the artificial light is super bright in comparison to natural ones. It's so bright, so strong, so bright that we are always trying to use some kind of real life diffusers. and techniques to soften the shadows. The cool thing is that in Unreal or Unity, you can do a lot of tricks and change the intensity, the radio, the diffusing radio. You can deactivate shadows. You can even do a crazy thing that is not possible in real life. It's changing the opacity of the shadow. So you can have a lot of tricks and a lot of tools to create the perfect illumination of your scene and to give the scene and the illumination the right purpose, right? And the second key concept is multiplicity. If you need to tweak each of the light of the scenes, we arrive to the second key concept, and this is multiplicity. In other words, we need to learn how to manage an environment with dozens of lights, sources reflecting and creating shadows and interacting between all of them. And understand that this situation actually helps us to create different ambience inside the same scene. I like a lot this picture, because this picture shows a lot of things happening at the same time. Let's take a look at this restaurant, right? We have a lot of different light sources. We have point lights with diffusers, spotlights projecting against the wall. We have light coming from the ceiling in the kitchen. We have emissive surfaces. We have LED lighting. But the important thing is that all of those all of those lights are playing together for creating three different moods. We have the fancy concert hall in bluish colors. You can see that, the bluish shades on the left part of the image. This is a fancy concert. Then you have the comfy restaurant in the middle and in the end, these yellow shades. We're going from blue to the blue that is suggesting movement, is suggesting night, is suggesting discotheque, to the more yellowish, this comfy home-like restaurant, and finally the white colors from the kitchen where it should be functional, right? So we have only one environment with three ambients, and everything is working thanks to the light. So we can play with a lot of lights, but bad news, this is actually not possible in video games. So in video games, everything is smoke and mirrors. We need to make this, but using the less lights possible. So it's important to decide which lights will cast shadows, or even if it's okay to use all of those lights. For example, let's take a look at this. You can see this I don't know how many candles are there. 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 12 candles. We have 12 candles, right? Maybe in the real world, each one of those candles will be a light source, right? Every one of those candles will project a light. This is real light. So those candles are super bright, but essentially are not illuminating a shit. I mean, that candle doesn't illuminate. There's a very small radius of light. But adding 12 lights in a video game for this small place, this is in fuel of nightmares. This is nightmare fuel for a lot of developers. I mean, you can go there to your coders, to your programmer colleagues and tell them, okay, I'm going to put 12 lights here. They will kill you. And okay, maybe your PlayStation 5 will explode. So this is not the right approach. But what can we do instead? What about placing only one light source in the middle of everything? We can deactivate the shadows, we can adjust the range and intensity, and the player will see what he wants to see. So the illusion will happen. The player will arrive to that point and will see, okay, there are some candles. I can see the flames and I can see the lights. I can see everything working. It's believable. And we are only using one simple point light. Compare this to this. I mean, this was, wait a moment, I need to go back to the other one. Yes, compare this. This was 12 lights emitting shadows, and this is only one. It's not the same. Of course, you won't tell me, okay, this is looking a little better. But come on, it's more or less, we can live with this, right? So finally, this talk has been fulfilled with small advices and ideas on how to we approach the light doing video games, and specifically what we do in Alkimia and the games we are doing. But let me share with you some final thoughts that had helped me and the team each time we need to design the light of a video game. First of all, the good mood boards and studying solid references is key. Creating mood boards with light and texture references, they should serve as a mantra, as the guideline every time you lost the track of the emotion you want to transmit to the viewer. Look for inspiration far from video games. I mean, there are life outside of video games. There's a big world there. Study the fundamentals, the classical painters, movies, comics, architecture, magazines. As wider grows your own iconography, the better the results. Analyze the environment you will be working with and create a prototype, create a mise-en-scène of all the elements if it's need. And also, the first step should be doing a block out with a 50% gray as a color texture. This can be handy to start prototyping your light setup as fast as possible. And finally, ask yourself questions constantly. What do I want to show? What do I want to hide? Is this design guiding the player? Where the light is coming from? Is the light helping the narrative, or is it playing against? And the last advice, and all the rules are here to be broken. So completely forget all those advices. When you arrive, no, seriously, Picasso went to Cubism when recreating the reality in the most perfect way you can imagine started to make no sense for him. He needed to break the rules and destroy all what he knew to advance and create something better, something different, something meaningful. So if the game needs something crazy, and after a process of thinking and a profound reflection, the decision goes for breaking the mood, breaking the continuity, don't use the purpose that I was talking about, and basically destroy everything I told you in this talk, do it. And if you know that what are you doing, you know exactly what are you doing and why are you doing that, and why are you playing so crazy with the light, do it. Because always remember, all the rules are here to be broken. And that's all.